Hi, I'm Fast and this is Lucid Clay Terrakion Strat brought to you by the Council. To challenge this raid, you need to have completed every single region and finished OT decks. Before you start the queue for this raid, make sure that you have checked your own and your teammates' Pokemon for both egg moves and hidden abilities, since there's a few used within this strategy. Also make sure that your speed stat match up with each other, because in some turns you will need to be the first to hit, while other turns you need to be slower. Terrakion was the last of the 3 newest raids to be solved, and now do have one of the most stable solutions of all of them. The first mechanic of this raid is the 100% progressive shield, where using any attacks of the same type that you already used causes the boss to gain an immunity shield for 9% resistance of each attack. Simply explained, if you for example use 4 water attacks, you will see the first one hitting normally, the second one will have a 9% damage reduction, followed by the third one having an 18% damage reduction, and the final fourth having a total of 27% damage reduction. In turn 1, we will have Mercury using Tailwind to make sure that we have the speed needed for the next few turns. We will have Stand-Loose Reflect to decrease the damage we take, Defog to decrease Terrakion's evasion, and Trick Flame Orb to make sure that it is burned. Burn will make sure that Terrakion takes a little bit of damage each turn and also lowers its attack. Turn 1 should end with every single one of your Pokemon getting their attacks off and then die. You might have noticed that I've sped up the footage a bit. This is to match the amount of information I will spew out within that specific turn. If you ever need any more information about the turn, you can always pause and read from the battle log or whatever pop-ups is on the screen. For turn 2, you have to make sure that P3 Samurott is the fastest out of the 3, because both P1 and P2 will end up in Torrent range the next turn. Torrent is Samurott's ability, and it powers up water-type moves in a pinch. This means that once Samurott's HP is at about 1/3, it will power up the water-type moves by 50%. Jirachi is also a key ingredient in this raid, using Lucky Chant in this turn to make sure that we don't get any critical hits landed on ourselves, on top of also being an excellent Wish user. Because this turn you will see Jirachi use Wish. This is to make sure that next turn again, the Claydol P4 will be healed. Here we do also get the 4th, 5th and 6th water attack used on Terrakion. This is why it's so important that P3 is quicker than P1 and P2, because P3's attack do have a 27% damage reduction, and the P1 and P2 will have more, but because of Torrent and the 50% extra damage dealt by their water attacks, they will still hit cap. As you see here, after all of the Samurotts have used their Hydro Cannon, Terrakion's second mechanic activates. Surdance will give +2 in attack to both Terrakion and its adds, but because of our earlier Intimidate procs, it just negates the -2 we had. And don't worry, Stoutland's +2 will be dealt with in the next turn. This leads us into turn 4 with about 74% HP left on Terrakion. In turn 4, we do have a few Pokemon that really needs their speed checked. This mainly includes the Poliwrath being quicker than the Claydol P2 and the Claydol P4 being slower than all other Pokemon on the board. Poliwrath's function here is to use Belly Drum and get +6 attack. And then you will have Claydol P2 use Psych Up on Poliwrath to make sure we have the +6 with us later on. This is also where we deal with the +2 on Stoutland, because the Claydol P4 will use Power Swap. P3's Claydol's job here is to use Trick Room to make sure we will all hit first in the next few turns. Into turn 5, we will now have 4 Claydols. It's really important that you do speed check this. Everything is stated in a document, so make sure that you take some time and read that. Also, all the different variations you can have on your Pokemon for stat-wise, you can see in the document. P4 will use Safeguard. This is so that we don't get any random targeting poison jabs beside the first one, and so Ferrothorn won't get burned later on. P1 and P3 Claydol will both use a Psych Up on P2 Claydol, so that they will be able to attack for cap for the next rounds. P2 will use Zen Headbutt as the first Psychic attack. So when this turn is done, you should have 3 Claydols with +6 attack and 1 with +2. Starting off in turn 6, we will have to reset up Reflect, and we will also set Gravity. The Reflect, as earlier, is lowering the amount of physical damage we take, and the Gravity will make sure that all of our attack hits. Another note about Gravity is that even though our Cladles do have Levitate, they will now be hit by ground attacks. P2 and P3 here will use Zen Headbutt to do a little bit more chip damage on Terrakion, also triggering its next mechanic. At 66.9 HP, a permanent Sandstorm will activate. This cannot be overwritten by Cloud9 nor any other weather-changing abilities or moves. When this turn is over, your P4 Cladle should have died and your P2 Cladle should have run out of its +6 attack bonus. Turn 6, you're throwing out a Smurgle to Like a Chant. The stats on the Smurgle doesn't really matter, so you can just teach Like a Chant to your normal Catcher Smurgle or your Ditto Smurgle. There might be other Like a Chant users that can work in this spot, but we have not calculated that, so if you do have any that fits, please give us feedback on that. Other than that, any stats on a Smurgle will pretty much be usable. A note to pay attention in this turn though is that even though all players with Cladles will use Drill Run, the P2 one needs to hit last because it does not have the extra damage the other Cladles do. This is so that we get the most out of our attacks, even if we have the first mechanic of the raid, the Progressive Shield. At the end of this turn, all of your Pokemon should have died to leave a clean slate for turn 8. The attacks last turn got Terrakion down to under 50.9% HP. This means that we triggered the 4th mechanic of the raid, where the boss releases a flurry of attacks. This gives the boss a +1 priority to all its action the turn after it's activated. So in turn 8, this is also helping us, because our usage of Quick Cut here that essentially protects for priority moves makes every move only do 25% of the original damage. Also make sure that your Ferrothorn and Sableye are as bulky as they need to be, because if they are frailer than they are in the document, they can get targeted and singled out instead of Ferrothorn using 2 Earthquakes. Now going into turn 9, Trick Room will have reset, meaning that we have to reactivate that with Glade. And the reason we are actually able to get Trick Room off before Terrakion's action is because we used Quash from this Evil Eye. Quash just makes Terrakion go last in this situation. Then our Ferrothorns just need to tank the damage from the ads and get a proper hit on Terrakion, which should trigger the second to last mechanic of Terrakion, Protect. This lasts for 3 boss actions, which will happen in this turn, and therefore we do not have to worry ourselves with this for the next turn. Into turn 10, we're gonna have a Torterra, a Sableye, a Medicham, and the Glade from last turn. Terrakion should be down at approximately 31%. Here we're going to use Will-O-Wisp on Sableye to burn it again, get that little extra chip damage. We're going to do Woodhammer with Torterra. Your Torterras do have some egg moves, so make sure that you have those before starting the raid. And we're going to use Close Combat with both Medicham and Glade to make sure that they get the minus in defenses and so we're sure they die this turn. After our last attack, the last mechanic of this raid should activate. The last mechanic functions as a typeless fake out and activates 2 times the first time you proc it, which would here be after all of our Pokemon has moved. And we will handle this pretty simply by using a Rough Skin, Rocky Helmet, Garchomp with Helping Hand, which is a priority move, to simply force Terrakion to use the fake out on that one. This makes it so that even if Garchomp don't actually get off any moves, it still do a decent amount of damage to Terrakion. This should be the last turn we really have to think before we just start spamming the last moves of our Pokemon. And so we will use Wide Guard to make sure that we reduce the Earthquake of Terrakion to 25% of its original damage. We are also using Tickle to lower its defense a little bit and its attack so that we can hit cap and so it doesn't damage us too much. This is everyone's last Pokemon and P4 won't survive too long. It's surviving this and next turn, and all it's going to do is low kick to make sure that we do extra damage to Terrakion. This VOD only goes to turn 12 because that's when we managed to beat it. If you have low rolled a lot of your attacks and not hit cap every single time, you might go to turn 13, and there you simply just press whatever attack you have pressed
previous turn until you actually win. Thank you so much for watching. I am Fast, and if you have any questions, I usually am live on Twitch, and I can also be reached on Discord. Most of your questions should probably be answered either in this video or if you read the document, but if there is something that is not mentioned in either, you can try to like in the Raid Den Discord. The Raid Den Discord is a collective of a lot of very intelligent people who has put a lot of their time and effort into learning the raid mechanics and the raids in MMO. Good luck on your raids!